Welcome in to another episode of Betting the Pitch. I am your host, the real _G Warner on Twitter. And today we're going over Serie A. And I guess I have the squeakiest chair possible. I'm going to try to not move anymore for the next 30 or so minutes. We're going to go through each squad in Serie A for this upcoming season, talk about what happened to all these clubs last season, who's been making big transfer moves so far, and then go over futures at the end of this podcast. Thank you, whether you're getting this on Twitter, StreamYard, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you're getting this. I appreciate the support, and hit me on Twitter, the real _G Warner, with anything you got. Going to start from the bottom, go all the way to the top. So Inter Milan fans, this is coming last, but I promise it'll be worth the wait because futures and other leans are after that. I'll start with the recently promoteds, which I got to say there's some clubs I haven't seen before. Cremonese has been doing a lot of signing, at least in the recent days. I saw them bring in Kirikez from Sassuolo, who seems to be losing a ton of people at this point, but that's, I guess, how it goes. Also, Johan Vasquez from recently demoted Genoa. Seeing Radu coming in, I guess that's not the Radu I'm thinking of, but whatever. I guess we'll see what happens, because I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of other deals that are going to be made by some of these bottom tier clubs. It looks like Cremonese finished, or I guess came through in the playoff. The winner was Lecce, who were in Serie A a couple seasons ago. I'm not sure that they were awesome. They certainly were in a good position to stay up, but ended up falling behind both Torino, who we'll get to a little bit, and I think and also Genoa, who have fallen since to Serie B. But in terms of looking at the Lecce lineup, it's very different than what we were looking at before a couple seasons ago in Serie A. But all these clubs, I would imagine, are pretty big favorites to go down again next season. We also have AC Monza, who I've never heard of before. Cremonese, at least I heard before at least once. Well, they brought in Cagliari's keeper, which is a big deal, I think. We'll see what happens with the rest of the lineup and who they bring in from here. Certainly Matteo Pessina coming in on loan from Atalanta, which we'll get to Atalanta later, but they have, I think, some big spending issues. Plus Carboni coming in from Cagliari as well. It seems like Monza is just picking up every foot from Cagliari, apparently. And that's what happens when you go down. You got to sell your players so you can't afford them anymore. So those are the three teams that are coming up into Serie A for this 22-23 season. I think we'll go from here into a barely worth more than Cremonese at only $42.24 million is Salernitana, who were the worst team in Serie A last season for the whole season and looked like they were surely going down until they won like a ridiculous 7 out of 9 or something like that down the stretch and somehow survived. Pretty cool, but they also they brought in a ton of veteran older players towards the end of or I guess the middle of the season in the January transfer window, and that was a huge savior to them. It's probably very unlikely that they can do that again. But the nice part is they got 3 teams that are coming up that didn't play Serie A football last season, and that's a big step up from Serie B to Serie A. I would think Salernitana, especially based on their squad value, we'll see what they do with their transfers and such. Maybe that will get rejuvenated by some more additions. Unfortunately, I think there were a lot of like half-year deals, not even one-year deals. They brought in Matteo Lovato from Atalanta. Speaking of Salernitana right now, some other names that I haven't really seen. Koulibaly from Udinese. I'm not sure how much or how important he was. They also sold Ederson to Atalanta, which might have been a little bit of a trade deal for Lovato. So we'll see what happens with that club. I would imagine they'll probably be fighting relegation, but we'll see what happens. Spezia, who played offensive football the whole season, somehow did enough to stay in the league despite some really awful losses at the end of matches and bad beats for yours truly, conceding goals late. But one nice thing about teams that are going for it it's very, very important to just try to score goals and try to get as many points and wins as possible, because that's ultimately how you stay in your division. From what I'm seeing here, it looks like in terms of their team, Maggiori's still there, who's I think their captain and most important player. They brought in Agudelo from Genoa, who seems to be a pretty big name. The rest of the names and arrivals, I feel like they're going to have a lot more work to do. Does Spezia, though? Luca Galdi is, I guess, moving in as their new manager. I guess they had gotten rid of whoever at the end of last season, Mota, I want to say, but they're a scary team to back as an underdog because they go for it, but pretty early if you're going to cover the spread, because they either take a lead or they fall way behind and get into an even bigger hole. From there, in terms of just going up squad values, I guess, rather than order of finish from last season, but c'est la vie. Or maybe this isn't, no. Order of squad value, which I guess is just as important and probably just as telling for what teams will look like next season, because ultimately money matters in this sport. Next, we'll go to Empoli, who were a great team all season and, really deserved, I think, to stay in this league. They scored a ton of goals. Their defense was questionable, but you can expect that from a recently promoted side and one that isn't great. They brought in Razvan Marin from Cagliari, who was playing a fair amount on loan. Vicario, I think, is a backup goalkeeper. I think it was their starting goalkeeper, was previously, I guess, on Cagliari's books. Stojanovic coming in, he was there last season as well. Maybe all these moves are being made official is what I'm, I guess, running into. But essentially, Empoli could score a ton of goals, and that's a big deal if you want to back a team. It's rough when you play the best sides in this league, because you really need to defend against them, and if you can't defend, that's a big problem. But Empoli look like, they're at almost $88 million squad value right now, so that's like more than double Salernitana. So that puts them fifth from bottom in terms of squad value, with AC Monza recently promoted right above them. So that's a little bit interesting to me, at least, and we'll see what happens there. Next, we'll move to Sampdoria, who had a really disastrous season last year, but started to kind of turn to youth, I think, because they knew their season was gone. They weren't really in the relegation battle, though it did get a little bit hot where they were. They brought in Caputo, who I think is going to still be around. Sabiri looked really good from what I saw. I think he was the young kind of attacker who was doing a lot later in the season. Yeah, I think he was the scariest guy on the pitch for them, probably all season, because they're just a very old team ultimately. Yeah, he's I guess dual national with Sabiri is with Morocco and Germany. Sampdoria did lose Caprari to Hellas Verona, but I don't know how big of a deal that was. Also, Yoshida, older Japanese center back, but I don't think that really mattered as much. Ekdal looked like he's going, so that's a potentially a bigger loss in the middle of the pitch. I'm interested to see what they do. Gianpaolo, I think, is a new manager, so I'm not really sure where he came from, but there's a lot of, I guess, Sampdoria, they're a proud club, no longer have the Derby della Lanterna because Genoa went down, but ultimately Sampdoria, they are a proud club that have a lot of history, but they were old. Fabio Quagliarella is still on the team at 39 years old and will turn 40, I guess, next January. So that doesn't look like they're getting much younger. They certainly, Sabiri is at 25, so that was important, but a team that looked pretty old and really got even older, adding Rincon in the middle of the season, potentially some rumors of bringing in some other younger players, but we'll ultimately see what happens. I guess Murillo returned from Celta de Vigo on loan, so that's helpful, but he's 30. So I have big questions about Sampdoria. I feel like that could be a team that's picked to be potentially at risk to being in a relegation battle, because they should have been in it last year, if not for how poorly the point totals were of the other teams. Next, we'll go to Udinese, who were playing really well at the end of the season. Normally a defensive side that tried to score a lot more goals this year. It didn't go very well for them, but ultimately stayed in the league and played a lot better towards the end of the season. I'm curious about De La Feu and if he's going to stick around, because he was very important to them and was awesome towards the end. In terms of arrivals on what they have on here, it looks like on transfer market, Beto seemed to come in, but he was there. Koulibaly left for Salernitana, as already mentioned. Strigo Larsen went to Turkey, so we'll see what ends up happening. Zegular looks like he's leaving, so no matter what, if I do one-man band podcast, I start yawning. But anyway, I'm curious because Udinese seems to always have a really great stock of young players that turn out to be really good. They sell some really talented ones that go and do big things other places, but then they're still good enough with what they have. I mean, selling Samir mid-season to Watford seemed like a big concern for me, but they didn't really miss a beat without him, despite being a really good defender and one that really stabilized Watford, as bad as their defense was anyway. Next, we'll climb up to Hellas Verona, and we're talking starting with Sampdoria. All these teams are above 100 million. So that's a pretty big gap between them and the lower minnows, even in Serie A. So we'll move to Hellas Verona. Monty Poe came in last season to play goalkeeper. He looks like he's still around. And I guess from what I'm looking at, Caprari came in mid-season from Sampdoria. Simeone came in from Cagliari, and basically Hellas Verona were an awesome goal-scoring team. They ran into kind of a wall mid-season and weren't scoring as many goals, and that showed how weak their defense was. But they still got some good results. They sold some players, and that probably hurt them quite a bit. Udogi to Udinese, Zaccagni to Lazio, and so that was a big deal. But they're bringing in Roberto Piccoli from Atalanta on loan. So I feel like this is a team that's going to play on the front foot, going to be really strong offensively. We'll ultimately end up seeing what happens with kind of where they go. It looks like Chofi, Chofi, I'll go Chofi is coming as a new manager. And I believe he was somewhere else last year. I want to say he was at Udinese, but maybe that distracts from what we're actually trying to accomplish here. Yeah, he was at Udinese. Good on me. Pat myself on the back as I'm wearing my Kevin Gosman Orioles shirt, because the Orioles actually hold on to leads, unlike the rest of Major League Baseball, which is incredible. Wouldn't have expected that preseason. Next, we'll climb to Torino, who just sold Belotti, El Gallo, which I thought was cat, but is actually the rooster in Italian. He just left for Monaco. Don't know if I guess this says he's without club, but he definitely left. Torino, they're just a team that, so under Ivan Juric, who looks like he's still around, they were a team that controlled the ball, had the ball, played on the front foot. And that's what you need if you want to pick up points. And it was a much better season for Torino than they had been fighting relegation previous seasons. Unfortunately, when I think about Torino overall, though, they had a lot of the ball and didn't do a lot with it, which is kind of a big problem. You need to have the ball and also score, because a lot of possession doesn't win you anything. It certainly helps you defend, but it doesn't do enough. I think Simone Zaza is important for them on the bench, but they need more out of Sanabria. I imagine they're going to still play the same style, because that's what Juric does. Even against the big teams, they want to control the ball, which is kind of important, because that essentially the less that the bigger clubs have the ball, the more, unless you're a counterattacking side like Inter, which is probably the most dangerous matchup for this team. I think it's a really brilliant strategy. They played really well and played Juventus really tough, their Torino rival. So I like the idea of kind of where they're going to be going forward. We'll see kind of what they've done with their defense, because ultimately when they hold the ball as much and are pushed up the field, that does put them in tough positions. But they're a team essentially of transfers from kind of cast-offs from other clubs. Like they took in Ricardo Rodriguez, who I think was playing in La Liga before that. And then also Ola Aina, who was relegated with Fulham. They brought in Brekalo from Wolfsburg, who was not really wanted anymore. They just loaned in Nemanja Radonjic from Olympique Marseille. So like I'm curious to see what they look like this year. And we know the style they're going to play. We're just going to have to see how well the pieces that they've added fit into it. And it seems to me that Sasa Lukic is going to be really important to them moving forward, especially while he prepares for the World Cup with Serbia. Next, we'll go to Bologna, who were so awesome once they added Arnautovic. They had to go through their manager stuff, which was unfortunate, because Sinisa Mihailovic was I guess his cancer returned again. I hope that he's going to be back on the sideline this year because I think they were fighting for him. I really liked what he kind of put together with a team. They brought in Liko Giannis from Cagliari, who went down. That's a big deal. I think the most important part is to see if they can keep Arnautovic around. He's 33, aging, but he is a goal scoring phenom. He is a threat. He might say bad things about Albanian people's mothers and get suspended in European and international competition, but I guess that's what you get for an attacker. Soriano has had a good season, but he's getting older. But then there's also some youth in the team. I'm curious to see if Svanberg, Dominguez, what happens with them. I think Aaron Hickey's probably, I thought he moved to the Premier League to potentially to Brentford, but I guess until that's confirmed. Gary Medel to play center back at like 5'7" and just ruin people's days. You kind of need that. Also really liked Artur Tiate, who was great for them this season. And Skorupski had some good games as well. So Bologna were good to me towards the end of the season. I think I'm going to look to back them as much as I can, at least until Arnautovic either retires or gets injured, because he was awesome. Moving up above that is the Sassuolo, who they're just printing good players like they have a 3D printer, especially attackers. They play offensively. De Zerbi, who was there, only his style got taken on by Dionisi. He looks like he's still around. There's great offensive players. I think defense is a big problem for him, especially with Chiriquez moving on, I believe, to Cremonese, if I saw that right today. We'll see ultimately what it looks like. Djuricic looked like he's gone. I'm not sure where he went, but that's unfortunate. They sold Boga last season. So money seems to be an issue a lot in a lot of this league, really all across football internationally, all the big leagues. But I think it's especially been hitting Sassuolo hard. I want to say that there are rumors about being sold that also might be clouding my memory about about Atalanta as well, who we'll get to in a second. I would expect Sassuolo to play offensively like they did under the last two managers. Big questions about their defense. And sometimes if their defense doesn't show up to play, they can be terrible and really, really bad and make any spread, no matter how big it is, not matter. But then again, they can also beat teams that they're far worse than. So that's a really hard one to pick out as a favorite. It's tough because they score a lot of goals to be on an underdog unless you're getting a bunch of goals, but it's unlikely unless you're playing one of the real worst teams in the league. And then as an underdog, Sassuolo can score, but their defense is pretty opposite of impregnable, like Mike Tyson. So scary. Moving on to Fiorentina, who finally had a good season. I think that they're going to be in European play, so that we'll see exactly how that stretches their side. They brought in Luka Jovic from Real Madrid. Finally, hopefully he can find a place to kind of live. Mandragora coming in as well from a million loan spells. That's important. Chiesa they had sold. Also, of course, mid-season sold Vlahovic as well. So that's unfortunate. But they played really well and got a lot of respect from the marketplace after they sold Vlahovic. So maybe that's a good sign for what they're going to look like going forward. Christian Kouame, he's going to be important to them. Hopefully he's I guess he was on a loan with Anderlecht, which is really surprising to me, but I think they'll need him now. Cabral played pretty well, and he's fairly young. We'll see what Italiano does, but there's a lot of talent. Nicolas Gonzalez is awesome and creates so much. If he can stay healthy, that's important. And then you got to really see what happens with that defense, because Milinkovic was awesome for him. I think he's likely on his way out, but he was great. And we'll see what happens also with their goalkeeper situation, because they were bringing a new one in. I can't remember exactly who it was, but a good sign for a goalkeeping position that seemed to be pretty unsettled last year. Moving up to Lazio, who score a ton of goals always, even under Maurizio Sarri, and they can score goals. Their defense is an issue, but I feel like they're a pretty good underdog because they can score, though they had some pretty disappointing defensive performances. Certainly, they sold a lot of important players, but also, I mean, when I look at it, I guess Leva moving to Gremio is probably an age thing. Zaccagni coming in, he was good for them last year. They had a pretty strong front line, even when Ciro Immobile got hurt. So we'll see what happens with them. Mariki returns off of his loan, keeping Mallorca up, but we'll see what happens with them. Pedro was awesome and is still so fast, even at 34. It's incredible. I like this team a lot. Lazio, definitely the inferior club in Roma last season, but ultimately, I think they're really competitive and are a team that I'll be looking to back this season. Speaking of Roma, the crosstown rivals under Jose Mourinho, they're, they've got a lot of good players. Mourinho knows what he's doing, but he played really offensively last season, a lot more than I expected. They brought in Zeki Celik from Lille, who's selling everybody. Also Nemanja Matic from Manchester United. So that shows they're beefing up the defense. Midfield also. In terms of who they lost, I guess Pau Lopez went back to, or no, they sold him to Marseille, so that's not new. Anyway, in terms of what Roma have, I mean, they're really talented. I think I'm worried that Zaniolo is going to go to Juve. That sounds like a rumor, but Tammy Abraham was great for them last season. And I would expect them to play a little bit better defense in a second season under Jose Mourinho. And that's a really great sign because their offense is great. I wonder how they're going to balance Zeki Celik and Rick Karsdorp because they both play right back, but I'm sure where there's a will, there's a way. And if Rui Patricio was good for them last season. I'm not sure he was great, but he did enough. And I think ultimately seeing if their defense can get on a better rate, then their offense will be really competitive and might make them competitive or shooting for a Champions League spot or maybe even higher than that. Can't go higher except for the Scudetto. So that's probably not that high. Moving next to Atalanta, who have a lot of financial and other issues. They had a really bad season last year, a lot due to injuries, a lot due to really selling their best players in the middle of the season. And it's hard to do anything when you do that. But they score a lot of goals. Jeremy Boga coming in was awesome. Demiral was an important center back signing, but they sold a lot of good players. So we'll see, because they've also been loaning out a ton of their players too. Muriel and Zapata are really important to see if they can both stay healthy. Both are 31, so that seems unlikely. Zapata was a big rumor to get sold last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he did this year. But I guess we should trust in Atalanta for having some good players coming in. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but we're getting into really lofty market values as Roma and above. Everyone's over 400 million for their team values. And that's a big difference in the 40 million you saw earlier with even Salernitana, a second season in the league. Next, we'll go to Napoli, who looked like they were in the race for a title last season, then kind of cooled off, and they watched Lorenzo Insigne head to the MLS, their captain, but didn't want to give him a long enough deal, and Toronto paid him a fair amount. Arkadiusz Milik, he was gone. And I think he's still in Marseille, so not sure there's too much to worry about there. And Gisa coming in was pretty big, and middle of defense, center defensive midfielder. And then bringing in Kvaratskhelia is a great signing. Someone who isn't known too well, I don't think, outside of people like me who watched a ton of international soccer last year, and the Georgian national team just revolves around him. That's cool. I like the Matias Oliveira signing because that certainly brings some physicality into left back for Napoli. And they are honestly a team that would just murder teams. I didn't really expect it too much, but they were so strong in certain ways. And Victor Osimhen, I wonder how long he'll be in Southern Italy, because I imagine there's a lot of people coming after him, worth $72 million almost. So I would expect he'll probably go around. There was a divide between Napoli and the best of the teams in Serie A, but still a really good club. And they are talented and can almost beat anybody. Next, moving to Juve, who are probably going to be a favorite. I would suspect. I haven't looked at these futures yet, but I imagine they might be a favorite to win the league this year. They did a lot of great business in the January transfer window, affordable transfers as well. Might be selling De Ligt to then buy a bunch of other players, but Vlahovic was awesome. Di Maria comes in. Chiesa hopefully will be healthier. They did say goodbye to Paulo Dybala, but I think that was more of an age and money thing. And we'll see what really they turn into. Allegri, as soon as they take a lead, they like to sit on the ball or behind the ball. And it worked fairly well, I guess, because they did sneak their way back into Champions League positions. But it was not a great year for Juve. And they lost Chiellini. And I mean, at his age, maybe not that big of a deal, but Bonucci at 35 years old also is a concern. So if they did sell De Ligt, then you got to see what happens. And that was, I think the most interest is coming from Bayern Munich. So I don't know what exactly would happen. I imagine they'll bring in center backs because of that. Maybe Milinkovic from Fiorentina might be on the list. But that's certainly an area that they need to focus on. And maybe Paul Pogba will eventually join as well. AC Milan, second most market value, which is surprising until you start bringing in Pogba. That might change quite a bit. but pretty close between Milan, the Scudetto champions of the league. Magnan was an awesome signing at goalkeeper. They brought in Divock Origi, who just all he did was score for Liverpool, and I feel like he'll have a good season with Milan. Kessié they lost, so that's a pretty big loss in the midfield, though they had at times too many defensive midfielders and not enough creators. So we'll see what happens there. But Milan did a great job winning the Scudetto last season, really thanks to a backup goalkeeper making a big mistake for Inter. But that's part of the game. They've been able to retain Theo Hernandez and really important players. So I don't see Milan taking a huge step back just because they lost Frank Kessié. So we'll see what happens, though the teams around them have certainly grown a lot bigger and better. And last but not least, Inter Milan, very surprising that they did not win the trophy, but they were better than Milan and the rest of the league the whole season, but did have some poor performances and fall apart, which was not great. Brought in Onana from Ajax potentially to take over and be a better backup because it really cost them the Scudetto last season. So to back up Handanovic, who's 37 years old now. Perisic's gone, Sensi gone. Those are some pretty big losses. Gravillon, I think, got converted at Reims and is staying there. He was really good in the French league, but I guess isn't on the same level as a Serie A center back. But I don't think there's that much difference in the league. Lukaku coming back in on loan is a big boon for them, and that might be the difference for the team. But Inter are going to be great. They're probably going to be favored against everybody, including being favored at Juve last season was pretty complimentary. But we'll end up seeing what happens with this league. But that's all 20 teams. I think there's 20 in the league. As far as I know, nothing changed there. So instead, I'll go to or I guess not instead, but I'll run through to the Serie A Scudetto. Oh my God, this is so hard. Okay, so we don't want Coppa Italia. Okay, so to win the Scudetto, Inter Milan currently the favorites, slightly at plus 175, Juve 185, Milan 4-1, Napoli 14-1. These odds courtesy of Bet Online. Napoli at 14-1 being so different than AC Milan seems pretty significantly. I mean, that's of interest to me. I'll put it that way. But I'm a little bit surprised to see Inter favorite over Juve, though they've been dominant the last 2 seasons. Lukaku come in only makes the rich team richer. In terms of long shots, Atalanta, I had a lot of interest in last season, but they were so bad that I'm just not sure today's really or this year's that's an option. In terms of, I guess we'll go next to the Coppa Italia. Inter favorites there, AC Milan and Juve significantly lower. I don't really know why that would be. But I guess there's some interest for me in Juve there, but Coppa stuff is a long haul and a long way to go. Top 4 finish might be some value here. So I don't think there's any relegation stuff, but currently top 4, Inter, Juve, AC Milan. Then Napoli is plus money, getting odds to finish top 4. That's of interest to me because I feel like Atalanta's come down. Next is Roma, then Atalanta, then Lazio, and Fiorentina after that. So I think it depends on balancing the European schedule because that certainly takes a lot out of even the big clubs, but especially the ones that don't have a ton of depth. And that's been a big problem for a lot of these teams all over. I think in terms of a top 4 finish, I mean, you definitely have, in terms of long shots, I don't know, Torino at 16-1, but I feel like that's very unlikely to finish in the Champions League spot. So I think I'd probably look at Lazio, maybe Fiorentina 9-1, gives them about a 11% chance. I feel like, or 10% chance. I feel like that's one of those situations where there's some long shots that could have some value there because really it looks like the top 3 positions are pretty much set. Though I do think AC Milan will come back to earth, so that might not even be as significant there. So there might be some getting odds here, opportunities there to potentially look a little bit deeper. In terms of relegation, I don't know that I had anything for Bet Online about relegation. I'm gonna load it up one more time just to see if there's anything. Come on, Bet Online, give it to me because relegation is always fun. I feel like you're in that forever because you never know when a team's not going to pick up a point for a very long time. let's see, Italian Serie. We got top 4 and we got the winner. Okay. Well, I guess we're limited there. They're scared. BetOnline's currently scared to put that all out. But I don't know. I had a good time going through all of the Italian league. I think, Juve would probably be my pick before I saw these numbers as being favored. So I guess I'm a little surprised by that. The Inter certainly has deserved it based on their play the last couple of seasons. I think from where I sit, obviously going to be looking a lot deeper in this league. Had a really good time with CBS Sports or Paramount covering those matches and putting them on TV in the US. Looking forward to another season of that. And ultimately trying to give better picks than their studio hosts. So stay tuned. I'm on the real _G Warner on Twitter, the real _G Warner, just for clarification's sake. On Twitter, you find me there. Feel free to leave comments on the videos. If you want to like, subscribe, do all those sort of things on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that would only get me in front of more people, and I would appreciate it. So thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for doing whatever you're doing. I really appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Next one will be La Liga. So stay tuned.